So once again, I started the story and I was like, but at the end, I really liked it. Did you like the story?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
It was very sweet.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way. I thought, okay, this is so different from the story before. But it was a good change of pace.
Yeah, it was. Let's take a look at Joan Leegant. There she is. And she, the Baghdadi received a special mention in the 2014 Pushcart Prize. And she's done a lot of books and she lives in Newton. And, I have some more things to say about her, actually. Let's go to my, Joan Leegant is the author of An Hour in Paradise and Wherever You Go. She won the Edward Lewis Walnut Award for the best book of the Jewish American fiction. She lives in Newton, which is, I like to say, the Highland Park of Boston. And she's 71 years old. So that is, here, Joyce. That is Joan. Oh, no. Okay, I'm gonna, there's somebody here, but here's your first question. What jumped out about you in the first sentence, first 2 pages about his name?
That is name.
Oh, I think I know.
Well, can I say, I think there must have been a misprint.
Yes, exactly. I knew there was something when you said that.
Yes.
Because it was M-U-R-A-D, and then on the page where it was quoted, it was
L.
mural.
It would, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I can't believe that she meant it.
I don't think that was purposeful. I thought, is it possible it's an editorial mistake?
Right.
Vanessa is no longer there, so we need to ask her that, I guess, when we get back.
The editor missed it.
Yeah, I think it was somewhere else. It was Murad. Yeah, I think
It was.
Yes, it came up again as Murad, so I figured the mural couldn't have any meaning.
Right.
But okay, Lynn, and then I'll give you my.
Yeah, the question here is whose story is this? I mean, my focus in this story was not on her. It was, not on him. My focus was on her. And I thought the point of the story and the theme of the story came through his dynamic with her and his relationship with her. I was not a fan of hers. So I'll just put it out there and see what other people have to say. I think.
Okay, Lynn, what didn't you like about her?
How many?
And are you talking about?
How many ways can I count this?
Wait, you're talking about the narrator, not the author.
I'm talking about the narrator, and is this a reliable narrator? We always ask that. And I think that there is this in Judaism, our rabbi constantly says Judaism focuses on deeds and not just words. And I found that she was all words in the story and not deeds. And she didn't want to take interest in anything. She didn't want to get involved. She didn't want to take responsibility. She was a passive person, and she came to this lecture because she said, quote, "I did what was necessary." And in Judaism, I don't think, if we want to look at this as a Jewish story, it's not about, having to do something because you feel obligated, but doing something from the heart because you feel it is the right thing to do. And what, if you think about Maimonides and his 13, isn't it? 13, his 13 steps. I don't think she fits on this scale. I just thought that she was a negative person, a cynical person. I just didn't like her at all. Okay, so we can play against that.
Okay, Susan, and then I'll go.
Okay, I kind of disagree with you, Lynn.
Great.
I think she was somebody who was operating from a deep hurt. And she was hurting so badly that, and I think in the beginning, I think she grew as the story went on, and she found comfort in him. But it took a long while till she found that. And I kind of like the way she came to the end. At the end, I liked. At the end, I liked the advice she gave her daughter. In the beginning, I didn't, but then I did. And I don't know. I did not find her objectionable. I found her a troubled person.
I think she was depressed,
Yes.
clinically depressed. And, you know, the divorce, you know, and then of course I do think the way I thought the writing was lovely and the way they let the story out, and full transparency, I liked it much better the second time around I read it. And
Me too.
that he ran off with someone his daughter's age.
Yeah.
That's enough to put you in the hospital. Come on. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Lynn, go ahead.
Okay, so every time he tried to engage her in anything, she was not interested. I mean, I think I can see why her husband ran away. I thought she was unworldly, narrow, closed-minded. Go look through the book. I
Didn't like
noted
her,
it
did you?
every time in the margin, where he'd say, "Did you know that?" And she was totally uninterested in not really wanting to engage with him. I mean, I understand she's hurt. I understand that he left her. But you know, as Rabbi Mafik said in his sermon, move on. I mean, she is having a real problem. Listen, this guy, he had a deep hurt with his father at a very young age. And
But we didn't know that till the end.
No, we know that.
Taka.
I would say, well, the story wasn't very long, but
Right.
so
Yeah.
we learn that he does not talk to his, hasn't talked to his father in 50 years. And the pain has been,
Okay. I'm
horrendous.
Alice and then Terry.
Yeah, I agree more with Susan and Vanessa, Lynn. I think she was very hurt and really looking. That's why I think she went to Israel. She didn't really know how to respond and what to do. And I think there's some growth at the end. I think she does begin to move on at the end, but it's not like instantaneous. I mean, when something like that happens to you, I think you do, whether you're depressed or whatever, you have to go into what I'd call a funk. I mean, you have to be really, really hurt and kind of not sure which direction to go. And I think, to me, the story was that this man kind of, he had issues too, right? But through their, I'm not saying a relationship, but through their interactions, let's say, she was able to maybe begin to find her way out of, her depression or her, disappointments.
We can only hope. Okay.
Yeah.
I have Terry, Evie, then Elaine. Terry.
Well, I'm sorry, Lynn, I'm not on your side. I feel like, I think what you're interpreting as indifference was her wariness to engage with him. I think she was a little, kind of nervous and unsure about who he was. And ultimately, I think she was very intuitive. She figured out that the story he told a friend's son was really about, talking about himself. And she figured out that the elderly Baghdadi man was really his father. So I really sent, and I kind of figured that out before she mentioned it. It seemed, that that's where the story was going. But I definitely felt for her. I felt for the fact that she was hurt, and it was an extreme that her husband had gone off with her daughter's friend. And ultimately, I agree, the way she responded to her daughter came from a place of growth, because initially, I mean, she sat down at her computer and started to write a completely different email, and then made it about face and came to a different conclusion. So I really like this story, and I like the way it progressed, and I thought it was really well written.
Evie,
I liked the story, and I think the adjective that comes to my mind is when we read in Torah about the word fallow, where all of a sudden the ground needs to rest. And I think that this was her period of resting, maybe becoming indifferent just out of necessity, to not have any agenda and just kind of, okay, whatever it is. And I think we all probably have periods like that. And I like the fact that little by little, she was opening up to him at her own pace without any pressure, and then able to kind of absorb what he was telling her. And then at the end, make some kind of a change. I mean, I just saw it a period of quiet growth.
I have Elaine and then Merle and then Joyce.
Okay, you have to remember that he came up to her when she was sitting on a bench, uninvited, unwanted, and you're not always so open to people. And I think the fact that she didn't know anyone in Israel gave her that she sort of, okay, I'll talk to him. But you have to remember, not everyone is open to meeting strangers and hearing their stories. So I thought this was a much more realistic story than it wasn't. I mean, I think if I was sitting on a bench and a man came up to me that I didn't know, I would certainly be leery. But if I was alone and didn't know anyone, I might give him a chance. And I think that was what the story was about, how two lonely people sort of came together and became friends. Now, at no point in the story did they say that they were intimate or anything like that. They were just friends. And I think we have to remember that. And I think they gave to each other whatever the other person needed. And that's an important point. I think that when he had her visit his father, she felt more comfortable with her daughter, and vice versa. So, I thought it was a lovely, sweet story.
I'm going to tell David that if you're on a bench by yourself, you'd be more open if a stranger comes by. I just want him to know that.
Okay.
I have Merle then Joyce.
I thought her problem was very difficult because her daughter had a friend who was, I guess, from Moldova and was a dancer and was an opportunist, maybe needed a visa. And so there was a lot of embarrassment surrounding this divorce, which was a little different from other divorces, and that all of her daughter's friends knew about this divorce. So that was hard for the woman in the story. But the Baghdadi was estranged from his father, but also estranged from his son, because his son was married to a Muslim woman who had no sympathy for Israel. So he wouldn't allow his son to come and visit because of this. And so he was really in a bad place. But this story reminded me of an anecdote that I heard from two different rabbis, that when you have a tube of toothpaste and you squeeze that tube, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Right. So your angry words, they have consequences. And if you don't apologize, and you don't make up with this person, there are terrible consequences.
Right.
And I really thought that's what this story was about. And the woman has the choice of not apologizing, not forgiving, not doing anything, and letting her daughter become just like her. And I thought the ending was really excellent.
Yeah, I agree with you. The ending is really, I just appreciated it. Joyce and then Lynn.
I agree with you, Vanessa. I think she was depressed. She didn't know anybody in Israel, and yet she was afraid to reach out to anybody. And when he reached out to her, she did not know how to respond. I think she was afraid to respond. She was wallowing in her depression and was feeling sorry for herself in that she didn't have any friends. She didn't know who to talk to, but she definitely needed to talk to somebody. And as she opened up and he drew her out, she started to feel more comfortable, and their friendship really developed. And I think the story evolved. She became more comfortable in her own skin, was beginning to solve her own problems. And I thought, not that it had a happy ending, but it had a more positive ending. And it definitely, I thought it was a positive way. I liked the story. I really did. I agree with you only on one point, when I didn't like her at first, but I saw a growth in her, and I started to like her. And I saw a growth in her, and I saw positive action, and I saw a friendship that developed between them that I hope would go on.
Very nice. Absolutely. Lynn.
Okay, so I want to answer you all. And this is a totally different, I think the story is sort of a parable. I think what the author is trying to say is that we need people. We need community. We need mentors. We need people to guide us. And making her like this and then starting to come out of herself is because of her relationship with this man. Had she not met this man, would she have changed? That's the question. And if you see the note she first writes to her daughter, it's horrible. And then he talks to her, but I want to focus on the bottom of 137. And I'd like to read this because I think Murad is almost a rabbi with her, is almost a philosopher, is a guidance counselor, is a social worker. I think in the 50 years he's been estranged from his father, he's learned a lot about what life is all about and how forgiveness is essential to the human spirit if you're going to thrive. So he tells her this man, he doesn't identify, is really sick. And the people in the facility where he is don't care. And that word care is really important. I mean, if you don't care about people, you're not going to act. So God bless you. One of my students was smoking a cigarette and watching us. I turned to her, but she kept staring. I tipped my head, hinting that she should move off. but she stayed put. I wasn't good with these young people. They were different from students at home. They required a bluntness, a directness I didn't have and couldn't appropriate. They found me vague and indecisive, overly polite. I allowed too many competing opinions in class and praised anyone who contributed. They wanted someone who was more forceful, someone with strong views. They thought I had no backbone. And this was my feeling. I mean, if we put on the board all her traits, she doesn't care about much. She doesn't care about what he's telling her. She doesn't care about whatever. I'm very sorry, I said when the smoker hadn't moved, but I can't help you. The Americans are to blame, he said. They brought him here. In Iraq, he wasn't sick. In Iraq, his neighbors cared for him. You have a responsibility. And I think that is the Jewish point, that individuals have a responsibility to humanity. I think that's that's Tikkun Olam. I mean, I think that's what Judaism is all about. I have a responsibility. It was ridiculous. I wasn't the US government, the US military. I didn't authorize the airlift of the oldest living Jew in Baghdad. Look, I appreciate that you're concerned, but I have nothing to offer you. Why don't you call your colleagues at Ben Gurion or ask your chamber music friends? You've lived here for 50 years. You must know a million people. Why are you asking me? He looked stunned, even for the first time silenced, as if no one had ever posed such a question. Why wouldn't I ask you? He said. I would ask everybody. That is what one does. You ask everyone. Then maybe you will get to the person who can help. Why are you Americans so afraid to ask for help or to offer it? I remember this from Michigan. People told me, you're a Murad. No one wants to get involved. I do not understand this. And I think this is also a condemnation of American society, in which we pride ourselves on our individualism. That's our culture. We're isolationists by our traits. And so I feel the story he uses the characters to condemn this attitude of why should I get involved? And we've seen that in newspapers all over, that people see people being beaten up on the street and they walk away. So I agree. I think that she does grow. Is that going to be a permanent? That's what you have to, is that going to be permanent? Or when he withdraws, if he does, from her life, is she going to continue to grow? So you guys tell me that. If you can persuade me that she's going to grow from this, then I would say yes. I think that
So
this.
I want to add another layer, and then I have Evie and then Elaine. I don't think it's not just condemning America. They're talking about the diaspora, and that what happens in the diaspora is bad. What happens in Israel is good. And let's go to Evie, and then we can come back to that. And then Elaine, and then Terry.
I had forgotten until I was listening to what Lynn just said, that one of the things that did strike me was not so much Israel, America, but just in terms of communication, such cultural differences that we're unaware of. I mean, I know that sometimes if I will talk to perhaps an Asian person who might be a lot more, even more introspective than I might be, or quieter, I should say, and then feeling that I'm being a little bit too boisterous. I mean, there's such a fine difference between different cultures and how we relate to them. And then also when Lynn was talking about responsibility and reaching out, what is the responsibility of the person who maybe does not know to let somebody else know that maybe there is a need there? I mean, a refrain that always sticks in my mind whenever I read is, or frequently is, and I can't remember, some psychologist that I probably read maybe 50 years ago, why am I afraid to tell you who I am? It's because all I have. And I think there's such a fine line in terms of letting somebody know where you are. And I think for her, it was easier to just kind of sit back and listen because she was at that at that place where she didn't have the energy to participate perhaps.
Yeah, that could definitely be it. So I have Elaine, then Sue, and then Terry.
Not every story has perfect characters, and she was definitely damaged, as was he. And sometimes you cannot move from where you're sitting. And I think that was the point of the whole story. And again, I think that they were helping each other move forward. And it's a slow progression. And maybe she got some insight. I don't think she's going to be this perfect giving person that Lynn wants her to be. And, you know, people are flawed. And we as a group want sometimes a happy ending. And the stories, because maybe they're short stories, they only go so far. And you have to understand that people are flawed.
Couldn't agree more. I have Sue and then Terry.
Okay, so I want to go back to his talking with his students in Israel when he is teaching, and he's describing the students as being blunt and how they talk about their, their feelings and how they criticize him for being.
No, she, that's her.
Those are her students. Agreed.
Oh, all right, her students. And I have to say, for those of us who have traveled in Israel or been there multiple times, you do find Israelis being rather blunt and outspoken. And very different than Americans.
Yes.
And I think we as Americans are always worried about, we want to look good to other people, and we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and we don't want our feelings to be hurt. And we're so into that. And it's interesting because right now, for the Musar class that I don't know if any of you were, I think, Evie, you're in that, aren't you? We're reading Morality by Jonathan Sachs. And he talks about that we, as Americans, we have to get out of our I instead of we, the way we think. That we have to get back to thinking about all of us instead of just what's good for the individual.
Absolutely.
As ourselves. And I just found that description in this book rather interesting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
My quintessential Israeli anecdote is, I ran the school for many, many years, and I had many, many Israelis. And the one thing, another difference between Israelis and Americans, you would never go up to anyone and say, how much do you make? Or your husband, how much? No one. And they continually would ask one another. And then I'd be like in a salary warfare because, hey, she's making $2 more an hour than I am. So that's one of the differences. Okay, I have Terry and then Sandy. Terry, go ahead.
Well, I just remembered that at the end of the story, Murad is interviewed. And based on what we've talked about, I think the interview is really kind of telling, because when he's asked, was the father happy to be settled in Israel finally among his people? The answer was, of course, his son answered for him. For his father, every day in Baghdad had been as the psalmist wrote, we sat by the rivers of Babylon and wept as we remembered Zion. And now we're asked, now both here. I'm going to take anymore. Not him, not me. You, the reporter asked, you've been here 50 years. There are many kinds of exile, the son said. So on a few levels, first of all, he didn't really acknowledge to her that his father was so happy to be in Israel. And he wasn't really being cared for well and etc. But also the fact that the son talked about him, that Murad talked about himself as being in exile. And what does that really mean? Was he feeling exiled just from his relationship with his father? Or, what does that really mean when he says that? And is he being disingenuous when he answers for his father?
I think very good point. Sandy and then Lynn.
You pretty much said it for me, Vanessa, about Israel. I mean, there isn't anything they don't think they have the right to ask you, especially if you're an American. They're in your face. They want to know how much you make. They want to know if you bought an apartment, how many meters. That's the most common question. Kama metrim yesh lachem? And they judge you by the size of the house or apartment that you bought. And so when he was asking her questions, I didn't think anything was unusual, because there isn't anything they don't feel they have a right to ask you. But on the other hand, that's also the beauty of Israel too.
Agreed. Lynn.
I have that quote on my refrigerator about, they came for these people, and and then what's going to happen when they come for you. So I agree that that particular incident, and I had that circled, and I wrote many kinds of exile. There are many kinds of exile. Closed-mindedness, physical isolation, righteous indignation, apathy. I mean, there's so many kinds of exile. But in the heart of this, he really expands the idea of action and the consequences of non-action. And to me, that is the heart of the story, because he goes back to, and he deals in facts. He's a professor. He always is citing facts. And in 139, he talks about 1900, when the 50,000 Jews in Baghdad, quarter of the city's population, things got really bad for them. And he said 120,000 Jews were airlifted to Israel in 1951. The Israelis arranged it. It was very important to get out. So I think he's talking about the choices we make in life. Do we choose not to act, or do we choose to get involved? And at what point, and this to me was a very philosophical short story. It raises a lot of questions about what is man's role in society. Is it to not to stay away when you see something that needs remedy, or do you get involved and take action? And to me, she asked him about her daughter and what she should do. And he gave her advice. I mean, he told her what she needed to do. You have to do this. And we can talk about things we should do, but if we don't act on them, then what happens? People can die, people can become alienated from each other. It's a question of moral choice. And that's what I thought this story was about. And she does grow at the end. My question is it enough? Does she go back into her isolation, or does she start seeing the value of a friendship, of a relationship, and what that can do for you?
I think another example, and then I have Ellen and Alice, of her about caring, is when he said, call an American doctor, call the embassy, get the list. Right. And part of me was like cringing, because I was like, oi, what if somebody asked me to do that? Would I do that? And yes, and look, it was diabetes, and, one doctor who cared and knew took care of it, and his life will be so much better. Right. Okay, Ellen and then Alice.
Okay, First of all, I'm sorry I'm distracted. I am finishing wildly the postcards, and many of you have done so many of. I thank you. We are at home stretch tomorrow afternoon. If anybody wants to come help, we're going to get them all done. All right, Lynn, your question about, I mean, I'm listening to everything while I'm decorating. Your question about growth. I think just the fact that she acts finally, she's so against telling her daughter anything, is definitely growth. Is it enough? I mean, that's, we have, as a reader, we have to make that decision at the end of the story.
Right.
But I do think that this relationship, if you want to call it that, has resulted in action. And that's what, that's the important part.
I agree.
Okay.
Alice.
Yeah, I'm kind of gonna continue what Lynn and Ellen were saying. I think especially in short stories, a lot of the short stories, we don't really have a resolution. There's a lot of questions that are kind of hanging out there. I find that even in some novels, it's like, okay, like, how did this really end? But I find it more in short stories. The authors usually bring you to a certain point and you can kind of say, well, she could continue growing or she could, backtrack and go back. You don't know. And I guess you put the ending that, you want. So that's just my comment on that.
Merle.
No, we don't really know how this story ends. The way the daughter reacts to the email is the real answer to how this story ends. And girls who are young can be very stubborn. So that's really the kind of thing we would have to speculate about. Did the daughter take her mother's advice, or was she going to end up like the Baghdadi who didn't see his father for 50 years?
That's true.
And I was thinking about a divorce. I happened to go to a wedding where the bride was in her 50s, so the parents were in their 70s. And the parents hadn't seen each other for about 30 years, and they had a very bitter divorce. But when they saw each other, they were affectionate, they were kind to each other, they had forgiven. And I thought that is what is so sad, though, that it takes 30 years. It's sad when people can't be more flexible. But I really think we don't know the end of this story. I wish she would write a sequel and let us know.
I agree with you on that. I think a couple of things. One, the whole thing about the last Jew in Baghdad, it just, it really stayed with me. And I can't imagine, because it stayed with me, that it's not going to stay with her. That look what happened to the exile part, the Baghdadi, the Iraqi, Murad. In Israel, he's an Iraqi. And in Baghdad, he was a Jew. So like, you're never part of it. And, that's the whole thing of this being about the diaspora, the galut, that, this incoming, you have to get used to it, but you are part of it. And then Merle, that story about the wedding is absolutely fascinating. I remember this because of a confluence of things that happened, but Rabbi Sarada gave a sermon at Rosh Hashanah on father-son relationships. And it was excellent. And he was talking about his dad, who was a dentist, who was still alive at the time. And I know it was 2001 because it was right after 9/11. And we had company with us who couldn't fly back to England. And our company and the person in front of me, a man, two men, were sobbing uncontrollably.
Wow.
Sobbing. And I think the father-son relationship, and Merle, you touched on the father-daughter relationship, but I will never, ever forget that. Sometimes Rabbi will jokingly say, well, what sermons do you remember? And I always bring that up. Well, this is what happens. But that father-son thing is really, hard to navigate, and for some people, obviously harder for some than others. Okay, Alice.
Yeah, I was just thinking, we keep focusing on the mother, what she's going to tell her daughter, and how she changes her mind, and then, what's the daughter going to do? And then really right before that, do we know the name of the mother? I don't know if we do. Anyways, the mother is talking to the Baghdadi, and she's, bringing up, how he's been treating his son. And
Oh, yeah.
she's, on page 142, she says, and now you're projecting that onto me, trying to get me to do
Yes.
what you aren't able to do yourself. And then he says, why is that wrong? I mean, so we don't know really, is he going to change? Is he going to approach his son? So, I mean, I think, again, we're left in the dark. We really don't know. I think it's interesting that the Baghdadi says, why is that wrong? I guess maybe it's easier for him to tell somebody else the right thing, the right thing to do, but it's hard to do it when it's yourself. I mean, because
Terry and then Lynn. Oops, sorry.
He's at one point, she confronts him before about this, and he says, oh, well, mine's political.
Mhm.
Yours is a personal thing. Well, even if it is political, that's no excuse really, in a way, to try to mend, the relationship. Yeah.
Absolutely. Terry?
Well, I want to pick up on something that you just said. Is it Alice? Is it significant that we don't know her name? Or is it just because she's the narrator?
Mm.
I mean, it's something to kind of ponder, because it didn't occur to me till you said that we don't know her name.
And not only, we don't know her name, but Murad, the Iraqi, the Baghdadi, has 3 names, at least. Son, father. I mean, he's named in Lynn and then Elaine.
Sometimes when an author does not name a character, that character is supposed to be every woman, every man.
That's
Oh.
the thought I had.
Yeah, and I think that's what I said in the beginning. I thought she was using this story as a sort of a parable of how we should behave in the world. But I think Alice brought up a good point. The fact that he is doing what he's doing with her, which should make him think about how he is handling his son. And for that reason, we need other people in our lives so that we get different perspectives. So I think that's what she's doing here. I mean, she's the narrator's pointing out his hypocrisy. And while he may answer flippantly like that, it's going to make him think about how he's treating his son. That I think you brought up an interesting point.
Thank you. Elaine and then Joyce.
Okay, so often people make a stand early on and they cannot move out of that state.
Yes.
Okay, you stop talking to this one, you stop talking to that one, and sometimes you even forget why you stopped talking, but you're not going to talk and you're not going to move. You can give advice to other people about how they should act. Also, sometimes I have heard people who have elderly parents to uproot them from Baghdad to Israel. The poor man doesn't know what the hell is going on, and the cultures are so different. Sometimes you try to do the right thing, and I'm sure the son felt he was doing the right thing, and it's not necessarily for the elderly person the right thing to do, because you're changing their whole life. And again,
But was it the son?
It wasn't the son, right?
No, it was.
It was the U.S. government, I
Yes,
think.
he said it was the Americans that did that.
well, if
Yes,
they had left him
that's true.
alone, he wouldn't have moved. I mean, how did the US government find out about him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just saying that sometimes it's hard for people to, I'm righteous and I'm right. and they cannot move off, and they know
Right.
that they should, but they cannot move off of it.
Elaine, I absolutely agree with you. My youngest son in middle school was just like that. Now he's grown out of it, but some people, the moral of the story is they don't grow out of it. And, these terrible, where they don't have a relationship is so sad. Joyce.
The fact that the narrator, I think, had grown enough in the friendship to be able to tell Murad that what he was doing was
Right.
hypocritical
Right.
to his own son, I think showed tremendous growth, and that she felt comfortable enough to be able to criticize him, so to speak.
Mhm.
Showed, as I said, comfort in the friendship. And I think it's going to continue. I don't think this is a one-time thing. I think it's going to continue, and I think it's going to be good for both of them. And perhaps maybe he'll listen to her. Who knows? Yeah, the story is open-ended, but to me, it has hope. I mean, I know I'm a cockeyed optimist, but I really hope it will for both children and for them.
Joyce, I like that you brought in the son, because we were saying before, we don't know what's going to happen with her daughter, but what's going to happen with his son.
Mhm.
I mean, and he says it's political. Okay, Abby.
Found it helpful personally when she wrote the emails that she did not send. And I know I personally, within the last couple of weeks, had an experience where things got to be a little testy. And we ended up doing, and I both ended up doing that with somebody else and did not send the email. But I think it was therapeutic because we could see ourselves objectively, or at least get in touch with the feelings that we were dealing with. And I think she was sort of reinterpreting what Murad had told her and then seeing her reaction. So I thought that was therapeutic for her to go ahead and do that turnaround.
Mhm.
I have one thing, and I do a little bit of research, and this was in a review. Joan Leegant's The Baghdadi is a good example, and definitely combines a personal story with some recent political factors, such as the fate of Iraqi Jews and the fact that French Jews have been leaving France as anti-Semitism begins to rise. And, they mention that, and in Israel, there's a real, I have to think of the word. The French Jews, it's not that far from Paris. They use it like as their summer homes, and they buy up all these big apartments, and they're there for like 2 months a year.
Yeah.
And so it's, that's another tension with exiles, with people, Lynn said it, you can feel exile everywhere and in everything. And, that's just another example. Sandy. Oh, wait, I'm going to unmute you. Oop. There, go ahead.
But that's exactly what a lot of Americans did too. They went to Jerusalem and bought apartments that they only used for part of the year. And it made it very hard for young Israeli couples to start a life. Many of them can't even get married because they haven't got a place. They can't afford to have a place to live. And I think, when I was living there, I thought it was very justified, this anger against Americans that bought up all that property around Jerusalem and left the housing crisis for young couples, especially those who were just getting out of the army, who wanted to settle down. It was very painful for them.
Right. Many couples in Israel depend on their parents giving them money so that they can buy even a modest place to stay. And it's fascinating. The Arab families, what they do is they build on another room. And if you see these villages, there's, like 3-4 stories, and you have a different generation, which if we look back to our immigrant forebears, that's how my aunt and it was my great aunt. That's how they all lived, the grandparents upstairs, the kids were downstairs, and they were able to help with babysitting and money and the whole 9 yards. So, I hope it has, and now I'm going to be thinking about how this story could end, like if she did a sequel, but I do think that, talking about is the diaspora. Max is looking at me. He just woke up. How we relate to the diaspora. Lynn.
I'm not so sure we need to be concerned about their children. I think we're probably more concerned about their parents.
Oh.
And if they're, and maybe that's deliberate in the story, because it's their frame of mind that has to transition into forgiveness or opening up their minds, changing the way they react to people. So when that comes, maybe the change with the children will come. I don't know if the children are gonna initiate, if they're gonna make the first move. Well, that never mind that. Okay, so I guess we can wonder, but I don't think that's the author's main focus.
No, I agree with you. I don't think it's the main focus. I think it's, how the narrator and Murad, how they integrate or don't integrate with Israeli society. And the other thing that I was thinking very early on, something Lynn said and something Terry said, is that I had a colleague, and everyone thought she was very arrogant, and but she was like an introvert, and she wasn't friendly. And then you take those signals that it was her that she puts out, and then you put your own thing on top of that. And that could have been with the narrator a little bit.
Yeah.
And that Baghdadi, though, he didn't give up. He did not give up.
No, he did not. He saw something in her that I guess I should have seen in her, which I didn't. That happens, Vanessa, is what you're saying, the initial impression that you have of people, but
Yep.
I guess he saw the potential in her.
Yeah.
And saw that the bitterness that she held within her has really colored her whole life.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that, and I may be wrong, but she said about the divorce that she was at fault. A lot of it was her fault as well.
She did say that.
And I would have to say that that's maybe the changes that are coming in her are only going to be positive in relation to how she reacts to other people, because I found what I said in the beginning, how I found her. And if she acted like that in her marriage, that was a big turnoff.
Yeah. Terry.
I just thought about the fact that I think when she started to really perhaps warm up to him is when she realized that they had something in common.
Mm.
And that kind of struck her. Like, this was eerie that she should meet this man and that he should have kind of a similar situation in his life. And I think that was significant for her going forward.
Notice her reaction to that. What was he? Was he stalking me? I mean, her first reaction to things,
like a little worried,
pessimistic, paranoid, that kind of thing. And that's what she needs to evaluate in her own life. How she portrays herself to other people. if that's not truly who she is.
Elaine.
Okay, if, again, my last point, if someone comes up to you, you're sitting on a bench and starts talking to you, a man, you're an American, you are a little leery, okay? You're not gonna get, oh, hi, how are you? I mean, come on, Lynn, give the poor woman a little slack.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm gonna
it's
agree with that. He had a
You know what?
mustache.
I'm reading the story, Elaine. I'm looking at what the story says. And that's how I reacted to her. And you know what? She's not a happy person.
No.
She's in broad day. I don't know.
All right, Sue.
Okay, so the one thing we're forgetting is that this would be a different story if the narrator had stayed in Boston.
Oh, yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Okay, so there's a reason that the narrator put this woman in a strange place so that she does feel isolated. She does feel all the things we've talked about, and that serves it serves the ending, but it serves the story by being able to show the growth and having her in a quote alien place. Because she wouldn't have put up with any of that if she was in Boston. She would have known her surroundings. She would have, so let's keep that in mind. And I found it very hopeful. Of course, I always find things hopeful.
Here, here. Max is awake. The hour's up. But before I go, I do have a bunch of announcements. Number one, this Sunday is Cantor O'Brien and Susan Benjamin. Hallelujah, Leonard Cohen and Friends. You're not going to want to miss that. It's a 9:30 Lox and Bagels, 10 o'clock start time. In the afternoon, after you're in a good mood about Leonard Cohen, in the afternoon, you can go to the Candidates Forum at BJBE. I don't know what mood you'll be in by then. And Friday night is Tikkun Olam Shabbat, and Casa is coming. And our collection this month is underwear for any size child. And and clergy classes start this afternoon. Hopefully, Max, you'll be asleep. We have the movie, The Juggler. We're discussing it with Rabbi at 2:00. I watched the movie yesterday. I had never seen it, and it's free on YouTube. It was great. It was a great movie. And I can't wait to discuss it. Okay, Max, say bye-bye.
Goodbye.
And I'll see everybody in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Bye, everybody.
Enjoy reading. Terry, it's great to have you here.
Vanessa, I was just going to say thank you so much. It's lovely to be included. Thank you, Judy.
Bye.
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 Bye, everybody.
Bye.